Welcome back to the Dori Monson Show. I'm Jack Stein. One of the stories that I've been following now for the better part of about a week has been this story of Patrisse Cullors, who's one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. And she is coming under a ton of scrutiny for her purchases. Now, she has bought something like $3.2 to $4.4 million worth of homes. Some of them are in very, very nice neighborhoods. I'll tell you that as a former resident of the state of California, Topanga Canyon in Los Angeles is a very, very nice neighborhood, and she bought a $1.4 million home. Now, you could be saying, well, Jack Stein, what's wrong with one of the leaders of BLM buying a $1.4 million home if she earned that money? And I would say there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I think it's great. I think social mobility is amazing. I think that if Patrisse Cullors wants to go down that route and she wants to say, hey, I worked really hard and this is the fruits of my labor, I say more power to Patrisse Cullors. That was effectively the argument that she gave last week when she was speaking to Mark Lamont Hill. She said, hey, listen, I've put a lot of my time, a lot of my effort into my consulting firms, and this is the fruits of my labor. I take care of my mom. I take care of my brother. I take care of my family. So what if I buy a couple of houses? And that right there is the language of a wonderful, wonderful thing I like to call capitalism. A wonderful, beautiful thing I like to call capitalism. You work really hard, and then you get to take care of the people in your life. Now, you might be asking, how did she amass this amount of wealth? She was working for a consulting firm subsidiary of Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, and it's basically they were talking about what they were going to do with jails in Los Angeles. They were talking about police reform, and she was getting something like $20,000 a month while she was serving as the chairwoman of a Los Angeles jail reform initiative. So this is the way that the grift works for Patrisse Cullors. Again, one of the founding members of BLM. You go to specific organizations and you say, well, I will consult for your organization for just a nominal fee. And then people go out and they say, oh, we have Patrisse Cullors, founder of Black Lives Matter, on our board. And then people say, oh, yes, I should definitely donate to that organization. You know, one of the most popular YouTubers in the world, it's a very young guy. I don't know his God-given Christian name, but he goes by the handle Mr. Beast. And he donated something like $150,000 to Black Lives Matter last year. And if I could reach out to people who think that BLM is a worthwhile organization, if I could just try to express to them that there's no such thing as just BLM. There are many different sections of BLM. One of them is the more militant wing of BLM, which is the rioters that we see out in the street. And the other side is the business side of BLM. And these are the people who are part of the grift. This is why Black Lives Matter is something like a $90 million business. So Patrisse Cullors was talking to Mark Lamont Hill, and I felt very bad for her because she has been targeted by a bunch of filthy racists out there. And they have been searching up images of her home, and she's had to have security. Here's what that sounded like. You can't help but feel bad for her.
I've spent the last week with security, and these articles have shown the homes that I live in and that my family lives in, and everybody's been like, well, is there an address? But you don't need an address because you can reverse image the images and pull up my address. And so I've not just been a target of the right and white supremacist in this moment, but obviously since the beginning of when I started Black Lives Matter,
very
I've been
sad,
a target.
Very heartbreaking. I feel very bad for Patrisse Cullors. Now, with that being said, I wish that Patrisse Cullors actually knew what the tenet of her philosophy is. Now, Patrisse Cullors has come out multiple times and said, yes, we are indeed Marxists. Here's Patrisse Cullors 2 years ago talking about it.
Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
Ideological theories of Marxism. Here is Patrisse Cullors again. This is last year. her saying, "Am I a Marxist?" Here is her answer.
Am I a Marxist? I'm a lot of things. I do believe in Marxism. It's a philosophy that I learned really early on in my organizing career.
You know what's unfortunate about this, though, is she says, "Oh, yes, I'm a Marxist, and these are things that I learned about, and these are things that I read about." Well, maybe she skipped some of the darker sides of Karl Marx, because if you've read a lot of Marx, as I have, you would discover that Karl Marx is a vicious racist and a vicious anti-Semite. And he would look at someone like Patrisse Cullors, and he would likely say god-awful, terrible, racist things. Not only that, he would probably accuse Patrisse Cullors of being a profiter off of the suffering of other people. And just to give you an example, I hate to have to read this kind of garbage, but just to give you an example of the kind of things that Karl Marx used to talk about. He wrote this in a letter to a friend of his when they were talking about Ferdinand Lassalle, who is a political commentator back in the day of Marx. And he said this: "It is now completely clear to me that he, as is proved by his cranial formation and his hair, descends from the Negroes, who had joined Moses' exodus from Egypt, assuming that his mother or grandmother on the paternal side had not interbred with a," he goes on to say, "racial slur. Now this union of Judaism and Germanism with a basic Negro substance must produce a peculiar product. Karl Marx was a filthy, disgusting racist. Patrisse Cullors is a grifter who is using the suffering of other people to benefit herself. And so what are we left with? People want to go around and talk about how great BLM is as an organization. I would submit to you that what we've just gone over proves otherwise." We have to take a really quick break. When we get back, we have a whole lot more for you coming down on the Dori Monson Show. I'm Jack Stein. We'll be right back.